It was early 2007 and I was a struggling NLP coach. And a friend of mine gave me this piece of advice that would change the course of my life forever. Hey there, how's it going? This is James Tripp. This is a video for James Tripp Chaos Wave. The title of this video is Why I Quit Hypnotherapy. Now, in order to make sense of this, you need to know how I became a hypnotherapist in the first place. Because believe it or not, before I became a hypnotherapist, I had almost zero interest in hypnosis. It was early 2007 and I was a struggling NLP coach. And a friend of mine gave me this piece of advice that would change the course of my life forever. Quit being an NLP coach and become a hypnotherapist. Now, the reason this advice had been given to me is because I was reasonably new as an NLP coach, and I'd had some clients, but I was struggling to make any kind of decent living from this. I was struggling to get clients. I absolutely loved NLP, and I really enjoyed the coaching, but I wasn't going to be able to sustain it unless I could make a living doing it. And my friend said, look, you're Richard Bandler trained, Society of NLP. Did you know that the General Hypnotherapy Standards Council will issue you a general qualification in hypnotherapy practice because you're Richard Bandler trained? I said, I didn't know that. They said, well, if you do this, you'll find it, I guarantee it, you'll find it a lot easier to get yourself clients. Now, I was initially reluctant to do this. And I was reluctant because the truth is, up to that point, I had no interest whatsoever in becoming a therapist of any kind. I'd got into NLP about 5 years earlier, and I got into it because it offered me tools and understandings that I could implement in my own life so that I could become more adept at creating the outcomes that I wanted to. So particularly the things I loved about NLP, there were two things I particularly loved. Number one was the idea of modeling, the idea that effective patterns of engagement with the world, attitudes, personality traits, strategies, all sorts of things could be modeled from people. You could draw that stuff out from people and bring it into yourself and transform your own actions and results. That really appealed to me, and I did a lot of modeling work for the first 5 years or so of my NLP exploration. The other thing that really hooked me was the idea of influential communication. The idea that we could use words, language and communication to move minds in powerful ways. That really hooked me as well. So I got a lot of value from studying these two sides. Now that latter half is sometimes referred to as conversational hypnosis. But I was never overly enamored of the frame, hypnosis. I didn't really care whether it was hypnosis or what it was. What I cared about was the craft of it and the results that I could get, not what it was called. I certainly had no interest in putting people into trance or anything like that. It didn't seem particularly relevant to making things happen. I'd never really bought that in the first place. So I'd never got into NLP, even to coach people. It was for me, but it ended up finding its way into my work, working with other people. Already during that period, I was working as a manual therapist, so I'm working with clients, and I found there was a lot of value in being able to help people move their experience, move their minds, because the mind and the body they're not separate, they're entirely connected. I was also teaching people martial arts at the time. So martial arts, again, for me, that's very much about personal power. It's about being able to affect particular changes or influence outcomes within a very narrow context of physical exchange. But it's still about empowerment. And I really enjoyed working with people, helping them up their ability, up their capacity in that context. And again, my NLP learnings found their way in there. So I was already working with other people in these two contexts. So coaching just kind of opened itself up as a natural avenue, and it was suggested to me by my NLP trainers when I finally kind of formally trained in NLP, which was not at the beginning of my NLP journey. So I'd become a coach in 2006. And as I say, I was absolutely loving that work. I was loving working with people who wanted to up their capacity to create the results they wanted to create in their lives. And it was really difficult for me to get clients. I was talked into this transition, become a hypnotherapist. And the rationale my friend had is, look, you'll be able to do all the same stuff and you're basically doing the same work. You're helping people make changes in their lives. And all you need to do is kind of maybe dress it up a little bit more hypnotically and all will be good. So I was talked into it, sent off, got my certificate, and there I was, suddenly a hypnotherapist. And it worked. It got me more clients more easily. Now that is not the reason, however, that it was life-changing for me. The reason becoming a hypnotherapist was life-changing is because due to the way I'm kind of built, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it properly. So once I was now formally declaring myself as a hypnotist, whereas prior to that point, the frame had not really attracted me in any way, I thought, well, I better find out as much as I possibly can about hypnosis. And I better make sure that if a thing's possible to be done with hypnosis, I better learn how to do it. And I better make sure my skills are absolutely top-notch. So it took me on a new developmental journey, exploring the development of hypnotic skills. That was my street hypnosis phase, all of that kind of thing. But also it took me much more deeply into understanding how human beings structure their experience and organize their reality from the inside out. So it was hugely valuable from that perspective. And it also set the conditions through which I could become known internationally as a teacher and thought leader in the world of hypnosis. So that really completely, flipped my life on its head. I ended up traveling the world. I was able to spend a year traveling the globe with my family and still working online and doing trainings as I went. So really hugely difference-making experience becoming a hypnotherapist and all that it brought with it. However, for the entire time that I was a hypnotherapist, I never quite felt at home with it. I never quite felt that it was me. Something was off. And I could never really put my finger on what it was until 2013. So this is, 2013, that's 5 years later. I've been advertising my services as a hypnotherapist, working with clients, doing stuff that looks like hypnotherapy, promoting hypnotherapy, all of this kind of thing. That entire time I'd continued my own development. Remember, I was in this from the get-go for myself. That's how I got into the NLP. So I continued my own self-development, not just training in change work, hypnosis, these sorts of things, but also working with other self-transformation technologies. And in 2013, I hired myself a guy called Steve Chandler to coach me, do some inner development work. And I did so because I've been greatly impressed by him at a training that I'd attended. Now, pretty early on in our coaching, an event occurred that was catalytic. It really helped me see something I'd been missing with absolute clarity, move my mind into a different place, and again, send me off in a different direction in my life. And it was simply this. At one point, one of the early sessions, I was caught up in some kind of story or other of limitation. And I can't even remember the details of the story. But Steve said to me, stop. He said, stop identifying with your history. Stop identifying with your stories. Stop identifying with your personality. And start identifying with the I that chooses. Now this was like, it's like a cold bucket of water in my face. Suddenly, I saw with clarity and I remembered why I got into NLP in the first place. I didn't get into NLP to change unconscious patterns or whatever. I got into NLP to empower me. To empower me as the difference maker in my life. To empower me as the primary engine, the primary driver for transformation and results in my own life. I got into it for reasons of personal power. That's what I loved. And when I'd started out as an NLP coach, that's what I was all about. Getting people in the driving seat more, getting people's hands on the levers that they could use to make the differences they want to make in their lives. That's why I got into it. And that's what got lost when I became a hypnotherapist. Because the whole hypnosis frame contains this idea within it that hypnosis is about getting past consciousness, that sense of I, getting into the deep underpinnings and unconsciously rearranging stuff. From the NLP side of things, hypnosis is about reprogramming, repatterning people outside of consciousness. There's very much an idea there that this powerful hypnotic operator does something to a much more passive recipient, and they are somehow transformed by the art, craft, and the skill, or by the magic of trance or hypnosis. Either way, and I'm not saying every hypnotherapy school is like this, but it's got a lot of threads in the culture, okay? A lot of this is in its DNA. This idea that people kind of should come in as one kind of unconscious robot and go out as a different kind. This idea that hypnosis is this magic thing to serve as a proxy for somebody's personal power. I don't have the power to make the change. I can't affect the difference that I want to make, so I need hypnosis to do it for me. So I had this realization. That's why I'd not been loving the work. And by the way, not because you can't work that way, but because it was not aligned with my values. It wasn't aligned with my values. Now, I'd still enjoyed working with some of my clients. That's because some rocked up already in touch with their I can, okay? And they were there just to have me help them make the differences they wanted to make, rather than the people showing up going, well, look, do it for me. I never liked working with those people, and I could never quite see that difference with clarity. So in 2013, I quit. I pulled down my hypnotherapy website and I went back to being a coach. And that had its challenges because I didn't have that neat category existing out there in the world that was so easy to have people buy into. Coaching is not nearly such a big frame as hypnotherapy, not in the general world anyway. So I had to do a little bit more work on narrative weaving and this sort of thing, connecting people out there in the world to what I had to offer. But it was worth it. But here is the thing. Whilst I stopped promoting myself as a hypnotherapist, I didn't actually quit working in a therapy frame entirely. And the reason for this is because I had a reputation. I'd learned to speak in certain ways, and when you learn to speak in certain ways, you attract certain sorts of clients. And I kept getting referrals, basically. I kept getting people coming in who'd come in from I'm stuck, I'm in a terrible place. They were very disempowered often. And also people coming in from a kind of mental health frame, okay? Therapy frame. Therapy is all about healing, maybe about mental health, these sorts of things. Those are the dominant metaphors. Coaching is about allying with somebody's I can, their personal power, having them get more fully in the driving seat of their life. So those are the differences between those two. So I found myself from 2013 onwards working actually in two different places from two different sorts of frames and ways of working. I had my feet in two different worlds, so to speak. And this proved to be a really interesting thing because my ability to work with these sort of unconscious patterns and without necessarily recruiting or aligning with people's personal power massively helped me in my coaching work. My ability to see, recognize, and cultivate personal power as a resource really helped me in the therapy mental health work. Okay, hugely. And I came to see something that I think a lot of people miss. That actually personal power is the master key. Somebody's sense of capacity, capability, their I can the vibrancy of their I can, so to speak, is so often the difference maker. Right? If you've got somebody who's empowered, who is even implicitly, unconsciously taking charge of their own transformation of direction, whatever it will be, and you do some regression work with them, they will take their resourced self back to past material and engage with it in powerful, transformative ways. But if somebody is disconnected from their personal power, likely as not, that revisiting of old traumatic experiences is not going to do much at all other than fire them back up, because they're not bringing an empowered self. Okay, they're not bringing their, what I sometimes call their transcendent self, the I that goes beyond their unconscious trances. They're not bringing that in to do the work. So around about early 2007, I started doing some very, very interesting work. I've mentioned several times. I started working with Rock to Recovery UK, working with armed forces veterans. This was really interesting because it created a context in which I was doing mental health work ostensibly, but actually from within a coaching frame. Created a context where I could bring all my hypnotic facilitation skills in, but always be aligning with and allying with the person's I can. Indeed, as part of my standard setup for new clients there, part of my framing, I'd say, okay, you probably don't know what to expect here. Essentially, people end up here when, in one way or another, life's got on top of them. And really my job is very, very simple. If life's got on top of you, it's to help you get back on top of it. So that will be one of my foundational frames, is helping people get from life being on top of them to them back on top of it. So it's a very subtle evocation of personal power, of agency, of I can. So I'm going to finish this video up now because I don't want it to go on too long. But I do want to say this is a kind of a master key, and I think it's something that a lot of hypnotherapists miss. It does exist in the annals of hypnotherapy. Some schools talk a little bit of something called ego strengthening, but they don't go into it that much. Most of the techniques I've seen for it are very, very stock, very generic, and not necessarily that effective. In my work, I work very, very strongly with it and have a variety of ways of bringing it out, and it's always implicit within the mix. And I'm going to suggest to you right now, if you're a hypnotherapist and you learn to work with people's I can, instead of trying to use hypnosis as a stand-in for their I can, as a proxy for their absentee I can, when you learn to use hypnosis that way, you will massively increase the consistency and the impact and the power of the results that you get with your clients. That much I absolutely promise and guarantee. I will also say that when you learn to use hypnosis in alignment with that I can in somebody, and use more subtle hypnotic facilitation, more like I talk about hypnosis without trance, so not necessarily with all the trappings of trance work. When I work with the military veterans, by the way, out of all the clients I saw across those years, only once did I ever mention hypnosis to one client. The rest of the time, I was doing very significant mind-shifting hypnotic work, psychoactive facilitation work, outside of the frame of hypnosis, inside of the frame of coaching. Okay? So by taking your hypnotic skills and aligning them with empowerment and true transformation, rather than just low first order change, low level first order change. I'll talk about that somewhere else. I'm not going to talk about it here. You not only increase the impact that you can have within a hypnotherapy context, you also get to take the skills you have hypnosis wise outside of that frame and apply them in a variety of other walks of life where that hypnosis frame might not be so useful. That's all I'm going to say for this video. That's all I've got for today. But if this has been interesting to you and you would like to know more, let me know, because I have a story to tell you, and it's a story of the client that helped me really understand the significance of personal power in a therapy context, not necessarily in a coaching context. If you'd like to hear that story, let me know in the comments below. If this video has been interesting or thought-provoking in any way, please do give it a thumbs up. And I'm going to be making a few more videos on the topic of hypnotic facilitation and communication for transformation, okay, and for empowerment, for working with somebody's sense of I am and I can, for creating people as the most powerful version of themselves in their lives. So if you're interested in that, please do hit subscribe. That way you'll know when the videos come up. And if you have any questions about anything in this video, of course, there is a comment section below where you can ask and feed into this conversation so that this conversation can fruitfully continue.